Greetings, denizens. Before we get into the visceral details of the V5 system, I wanted to go over the basic overview of the V5 system, specifically the main engine that will be carrying you through the game mechanically, the die rolling, and a quick look at what we as players are going to be playing within this system of Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, as to add some context for future videos. If you are a veteran to V5 or World of Darkness as a whole, this video might not be all that useful to you, but if you are new, or you are somebody who has trouble explaining V5 to newcomers, then this video might be a valuable tool for you to use. Hell, if someone asks you what is V5 and how do you play, you can probably just point them in the direction of this video, and I'm confident that they will at least walk away with a better understanding of what they're going to get into. An important note before we get rolling though, if you haven't already, I would suggest giving the main core book a read, as that has a plethora of information about the game itself and the setting and the narrative set pieces for it. I know that not all of us are keen on reading large books or have a difficult time retaining knowledge through reading, but I still feel it's worth pursuing so that you can cement the rules more along with my videos. It's proven that trying to learn something new through different modalities of learning helps people retain that knowledge. So, what is V5 and how do you play it? I think it's prudent to start with the role that any given character or player will take up within the game. In V5, your ST will ask you to roll a die pool for any given task your character might need to perform, such as telling a lie or throwing a punch. A die pool consists of a certain number of die 10s dictated by certain traits of your character sheet. On average, the traits you will be using to form your die pool will consist of a combination of an attribute, your character's natural innate physical, social, or mental capabilities, and a skill, a learned and trained competency in certain fields of expertise, such as firearms or politics. Your attributes and skills will have a rating of 1 through 5 demarcated as dots on the character sheet, which you will see in the next video. You will take the rating of the specific attribute and skill that the ST has deemed appropriate for the given role, and you will add them together. The sum total will be your die pool for that role. How do you know if you succeeded or failed? Easy. If you are using the special V5 die 10, there are specific symbols on the die faces you want to look out for. If you are using regular die 10s, you're going to want to look out for a specific number. A success on a V5 die will be denoted with the iconic Ankh symbol for Vampire the Masquerade. For a numbered die 10, the target number you want to look for a success is 6. Any blanks on the V5 die, no symbol, is not considered a success. On a numbered die 10, anything 5 or below is not a success. To succeed in an overall roll, you must accumulate a number of successes as dictated by the ST in relation to how difficult the task is. This number is known as the difficulty threshold and will be the number that you'll always be trying to hit to see if you pass or fail a roll. The difficulty threshold will be anywhere between 1 and 7 for the most part, with 1 being really easy, while 7 represents a near impossible task, though your ST can go higher if they want to. Your roll must meet or exceed this threshold to be considered a successful roll, in which your character has successfully completed the task they are trying to do. Not meeting the threshold results in a failure, and your character does not achieve what they wanted. V5 goes a bit further than just basic success or failure, however. You can roll criticals that can lead to greater successes, or bad failures. If your die roll consists of a pair or multiple pairs of the Ankh symbol with stars on each side, or the special Ankh, then that is considered a critical roll. Those pairs of 10s or special Ankhs will count as 4 successes instead of just 2. And these do stack for every pair that you get within a given roll, should you be so lucky. Keep in mind, however, that this does not guarantee success. Should you fail to meet the difficulty threshold even if you roll a crit, the overall roll is still considered a failure. On the opposite end of that, you have the chance of rolling a total failure or critical failure. For V5 dice, this is denoted by the fanged skull symbol. For regular dice, it is the number 1. Should you fail the overall roll by not meeting the threshold, and none of the dice in your die pool are successes, that is considered a total failure, which means your ST can essentially dictate whether the failure is worse than it normally would be. If you end up getting a 1 or a fanged skull on a failure, meaning you didn't meet the threshold, then that could be considered a critical failure. But a critical failure doesn't mean anything on its own. You have to consider the hunger system, which is a whole new layer to the die roll that I will now be going over, because it is probably the most important aspect to the dice rolling aspect of V5 that your character and you as a player will encounter while playing. By now, you should have a pretty good idea as to the basic cycle of play for Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition regarding the die rolling. But, as I mentioned, there's a whole nother layer to the dice that you will be interacting with 95% of the time. The hunger system. Remember when I mentioned that as a vampire, you will be afflicted by the supernatural hunger and need for blood, to the point where the beast within could force you to act in ways you wouldn't normally want to, monstrous ways. Well, the hunger system is the mechanical game representation of the constant lure that the beast has in all vampires. How does it work? On your character sheet, you'll see a hunger track that's rated from 1 through 5. This track is the mechanical representation of your character's hunger throughout the game. Your hunger will wax and wane depending on the situation that's happening. From 0 hunger, which means you are completely filled, nice and satiated, which means you've probably killed somebody to feed off of them, or hunger 5, which means you are so completely ravenous to the point that you are going to lose control if you don't get a bite to eat very, very soon. Your hunger will increase as you call upon supernatural powers of the blood, and will decrease every time you feed on the blood of mortals or other sources. There are several things that can influence your hunger level, but the main game mechanic that will dictate if you go up in hunger or not is called the Rouse check. During the game, you might need to activate certain vampiric abilities, like a discipline or something like that, that call for a Rouse check. A Rouse check is simply a roll of 1 die 10, and on a success, you do not go up in hunger. On a fail, your hunger increases by 1. An important side note to this to keep in mind is a Rouse check does not dictate the success or failure of any given ability that you're trying to do. A Rouse check is only to determine potential hunger increases. Abilities, powers, and anything else that might call for a Rouse check will have their own mechanics associated with them to determine whether they succeed or fail. So, how does your hunger play into your die rolls? When you have your dice pool figured out for whatever task you are trying to do, you will take note of the current level of hunger you have. You will then change that many dice in your die pool with hunger dice. Hunger dice are just like regular dice, but they are of a different color, so you can differentiate between the regular die and the hunger dice. The standard color assortment is black and red, black for regular dice, red for hunger dice, but any color combination will work as long as you and the ST know which dice are the hunger dice. An example, if you have a die pool of 5 and you are at a hunger of 3, your die pool should look like this. Once you have determined your die pool with hunger dice, you can then make your roll. The reason the hunger dice are important here is because depending on the roll result, your beast may come out in unexpected and unwanted ways, potentially causing complications, conflict, or outright monstrous acts. How do hunger dice influence your beast? 2 ways: messy critical and bestial failures. Remember when I mentioned that you could roll criticals earlier? Well, when you roll a critical, as I detailed before, if one of the dice in the pair, or one or more of the dice in the pair, is a hunger die, then you will have rolled what is called a messy critical, should you succeed on the overall roll. A messy critical results in the character getting what they want, but some complication enters the mix due to their beast manifesting in some way. The complication is usually determined by the ST and can range from narrative effects to more mechanical effects like going up in hunger, taking minor damage, committing a social faux pas, or succumbing to some supernatural compulsion. On the opposite side of that, remember when I mentioned that crit fails only come into play when considering hunger? Well, if you fail the overall roll for a given task, and one or more dice come up as a skull or 1, that is considered a bestial failure. This results in your character not only failing to achieve the task they set out to do, but the beast manifests in a compromising way through violence to others, violence to themselves, blatant masquerade breaches, acts that incur stains on your humanity, or other really bad things. While not mandatory, it is encouraged that the player weigh in on the potential messy crit bestial failure results and collaborate with the ST to come up with something interesting that fits the character and narrative. Per the core rules, messy crits and bestial failures results in the same severity of consequences, with the overall task succeeding or failing being the only difference, meaning that the player has essentially twice the chance per roll for the beast to manifest in unwanted ways and potentially cause a lot of problems. This may or may not be oppressive depending on the table that you have, and it could be handled differently depending on the storyteller. But for me personally, I tend to lessen the overall severity of consequences for messy critical specifically, because the messy critical is supposed to represent your player still getting what they want. Their beast just kind of comes out in a way that is unexpected. A messy critical isn't supposed to be their beast completely ruining what they were trying to do, which is what I see a lot of people run into when I hear about their games. They rolled a critical and ended up being a messy critical, but the results of the messy critical just completely destroy the success that they were trying to get, which can really bring down a player when that happens. So I like to tone down the messy critical consequences depending on what's going on, but I also make it a point that bestial failures are going to be very bad. Bestial failures will always bring a tide of extreme misfortune and horrible consequences should they come about. But like I said, mileage may vary by table, so have fun with it and make sure you talk to your group. And that, my friends, is the basic overview of V5. By this point, you should have a good foundation of the setting and how V5 will function as a game system. There are, of course, more rules to cover for V5 that will make it more complete, immersive, and fun, such as the nuances of combat, the specifics of vampiric abilities, advantages, and other aspects of your character sheet that I'll be going over in more detail in the next video. So stay tuned for those, but for now, I must bid you farewell. Until the next video, I will see you then. And remember, nothing good ever happens after dark.